So we hear this term all the time, right? Climate haven. And today, we're going to look at a place that's often at the top of that list, Marquette, Michigan. It's this city right on the edge of a huge northern forest. But here's the real question. Is a safe future something you just get, or is it something you actually have to build? The whole idea of a climate haven is pretty appealing, isn't it? I mean, a place with a cool climate, tons of fresh water. Marquette seems to check all the boxes. It feels like an obvious choice. But as we're about to find out, the real story on the ground, well, it's a whole lot more complicated than that. So to really get to the bottom of this, to figure out if Marquette can actually be a refuge, we've got to dig into its story. We're going to look at its really unique spot, sandwiched between two giant forests. We'll uncover this hidden industrial past that totally changed everything. And then we'll see what the climate models are actually saying is coming for the shores of the world's biggest freshwater lake. Okay, so first up, Marquette's story really begins with where it is on the map. See, it's not just in a forest. It's at the exact meeting point, this collision course of two huge competing ecosystems. And there's a word for that meeting point. It's called an ecotone. Think of it as the front line, where the cold-loving boreal forest from up north clashes with the warmer temperate forest from down south. And because it's right on this ecological fault line, the whole area is super sensitive to even small shifts in climate. So picture this. On one side, you've got your classic northern species, the fir, the spruce, the birch trees. They love the cold. And on the other side, you have the temperate forest heavy hitters, like maples and oaks, that do much better in the warmth. Marquette is literally where these two worlds collide. And now, climate change is basically pushing one of those worlds to take over the other. But, this whole ecological story has a huge human plot twist. You might look at the Upper Peninsula and think it's this pristine, untouched wilderness. But the truth is, Marquette's forests have already been through a massive and pretty recent transformation. And you can see just how fast it all happened. What was once this ancient, old-growth forest got completely remade in just a few decades. First came the discovery of iron ore, which kicked off this insane logging boom. Then all the leftover wood, they call it slash, it became fuel for these gigantic wildfires. And that's what created the younger, totally different forest that's standing there today. Yeah, and if you look at the historical records, it's clear that whole era of logging and fire left a pretty deep scar. It basically stopped key species like hemlock and pine from ever really coming back. So, get this, the natural forest that everyone's trying to protect right now, it's already a landscape that's just recovering from a huge, huge disruption. Okay, so you've got that industrial history. Now, let's layer today's big challenge right on top of it, a climate that's changing fast. So what are the projections actually saying about Marquette's future? And honestly, the numbers are pretty startling. We're talking about a warming of 5 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. And what's wild is that the winters are projected to warm even more than that. For an ecosystem that's already on a knife's edge, this is like a giant shove in one direction. And it's not just about the feet, either. The entire water cycle is getting a rewrite. Yeah, there's more rain and snow overall, but it's coming in these intense downpours. It creates this weird paradox where you have wetter springs followed by drier summers. And because Lake Superior isn't freezing over as much, the coastline is just getting hammered by the full force of those winter storms. So with all these changes, you get some clear winners and losers. It's pretty straightforward, really. The species from the warmer temperate forest, your oaks, your white-tailed deer, they're probably going to do great. But those iconic northern species, think moose, think fir trees, they're going to get pushed right to their limits by the heat and a bunch of new parasites. And the list of threats just keeps going. More intense storms can literally flatten entire sections of the forest. The hotter, drier summers, well, that means a much higher risk of wildfires. And then you've got invasive pests like the emerald ash borer, which used to be stopped by the cold winters. Not anymore. Now they're just marching north. But here's the thing. This future isn't set in stone. Faced with all of these huge challenges, the community in Marquette isn't just sitting back and watching it happen. No way. They're actively working to build resilience right from the ground up. And let me tell you what that actually looks like on the ground. They're ripping out concrete seawalls and putting in living shorelines that can soak up the energy from storms. They're out there diversifying the forests, planting trees that are better adapted to the new climate, and they're protecting the wetlands, which are basically nature's flood control system. The whole idea here is to work with nature instead of trying to fight it. So after all that, what's the verdict? Well, a climate refuge in Marquette, it's not something that's just going to happen on its own. It's a possible future, for sure, but it's one that has to be actively and very carefully built. And this all brings us back to a really fundamental question, doesn't it? When we're looking for safety in this changing world, are we just looking for a place to find, or are we looking for a place we need to build? I think the story of Marquette really suggests that a true refuge isn't just some destination you arrive at. It's a creation. It's something that comes from foresight, from community, and from a whole lot of hard work.